American literature and language in general have gone through dramatic changes over the years. Due to the conquests of the Vikings and the Normans, which introduced new words and cultural changes to the people who lived on the land of modern-day Britain, the topics that were covered in the early English literature revolved around themes of heroism, war, and courtly love. But even though that was the case for a few hundred years, due to the evolving nature of language and culture, the literary landscape would be changed and modified over and over again. Due to these major changes, for convenience's sake, people have formulated 6 major literary eras for the English language, each representing their own unique themes, tropes, and authors. These 6 literary eras happen to be the Old English era, the Middle English era, the Renaissance era, the Neoclassical era, the Romantic era, the Victorian era, the Modernism era, and the Postmodernism era. During the span of this video series, we are only going to cover the last 4 aforementioned literary eras of the English language, because these eras, in my opinion, are most representative of the different themes, values, and beliefs which we, as a society, have so eagerly accepted as our own. Many of us not even realizing that they have been cultivating now for hundreds of years. The first era I would like us to go over is the Romantic era. Now, you could think that, considering the fact that the Romantic era is called Romantic, it has something to do with romance. Well, it doesn't. Contrary to its name, it has almost nothing to do with romance. In fact, this era of literature very well mirrors the nature of the historic state of affairs during this period of time, which mainly revolved around rebellions. Most people agree that Romanticism began somewhere around the year 1800 AD as a response to the American Revolution, which lasted from 1775 through 1783, and the French Revolution, which lasted from 1789 through the 1790s. The notions of individual rights and liberties, which were intrinsic to the mindset of those who rebelled against their former governments, were now being popularized by the different authors who were prominent during the Romantic era. This idea that the traditional system of government, class, and progression was to be rejected and replaced with something else became very popular among many different authors of this era, calling for the destruction of the values, beliefs, and customs of the old. The prior era that was before the Romantic era, that being the Neoclassical era, which is also known as the Age of Reason, used to embrace and reflect such conservative notions as the pursuit of perfection, harmony, logic, and objectivity. All of these notions were absolutely thrown out the window by the Romantic era and replaced with individualism, subjectivity, imagination, and the expression of emotions. This blatant rejection of conservative ideals was one of the most powerful contributing factors for the popularization of liberalism, which pursues equality, freedom of the individual, and the protection of their rights, which is still prominent among many individuals even to this day. If there is anything a human being can learn from history, it is that nothing lasts forever. Great kingdoms and empires have risen. Great kings and queens have ruled their nations, and long years of prosperity have been enjoyed by many people. But unfortunately, all of that came to an end. Great kingdoms and empires have crumbled. Great kings and queens have perished, and long years of prosperity have turned into long years of torment and warfare. No matter the current state of affairs, the likelihood of it changing is guaranteed. The notions, the beliefs, and the ideas that we as human beings hold on to so dearly now will inevitably be swapped by something else. Something that could be very reminiscent of the days before us. That is very well represented by the Victorian era. This era, rather than continuing in the steps of its predecessor, which concerned itself with destroying conservatism, traditionalism, and perfectionism, which were immensely popular during the Neoclassical era, goes right back to objectivity, reason, and logic that are so intrinsic and reminiscent of the Age of Reason, which the Romantic era was so bent on rebelling against. Due to this, the Victorian era's literature was a lot more realistic and grounded than the Romantic era's. Similarly to the Romantic era's writings, though, the Victorian era's literature is very much a reflection of the societal changes that were occurring around the world at this period of time. It so happened that the Victorian era began as Queen Victoria ascended the British throne in 1837 and ended when Queen Victoria died in 1901. During this period of time, Britain reached its zenith of power. It became immensely big, having land on every single continent in the world. When it came to its economy, it also became immensely efficient, exceeding the exports of the United States by 3 to 4 times, yielding immense wealth to Britain. The fact was, though, that even though Britain was immensely wealthy and powerful, there were still many social problems that were unaddressed. For example, the conditions for an everyday worker were horrendous. A lot of the money-hungry businessmen would make the conditions for their workers absolutely abysmal for the sake of churning even more profit. This problem and many others were greatly critiqued by the writers of the Victorian era. So, while the literature during the Victorian era did reflect the technological progress, realism, and objectivity of Britain's power, it also did not shy away from critiquing the social problems of Britain as well. While the enthusiasm of the Victorian era regarding technological, social, and cultural progress filled the first years of the Modernism era, it quickly subsided after the start of the First World War in 1914. This massive war cost millions of lives, becoming arguably the most devastating war the world had ever seen. During this war, the people of European countries went out of their way to cause internal unrest too. Good examples of which are England's internal governmental turnovers and Ireland's rebellions. World War I was a pivotal force that decimated Western civilization as it was known beforehand. It led to revolutions, poverty, and unrest, which ultimately gave a chance for Nazi Germany to take over huge swaths of land, which resulted in the Second World War in 1939. As was the case after the First World War, millions of people died, economies crumbled, and more rebellions ensued. Due to all of this chaos, death, and suffering, people started believing that things could never really go back to how they were beforehand. Therefore, as is reminiscent of the Romantic era, the Modernism era rejected the notions of the past era. And not just the past era. It went out of its way to fundamentally uproot the different ideas and understandings that human beings have had over the thousands of years of existence. The authors of this era went out of their way to subvert the rules and customs of literature that had been set beforehand, bringing forth more diverse, varied, and unique spins on the status quo. The notion of individuality was also questioned, thanks to the psychological discoveries of the time, causing some to even go out of their way to claim that real individuality doesn't exist, in this way rejecting what was and creating meaning from the ground up. The postmodernism era is the era in which we are currently living. It is very reflective of the modernist era, having its literary work revolve around the questioning of everything and everyone. While modernism sought to experiment to somehow issue in a new and better age that would not lead to the catastrophes of the 20th century, the literature and attitude of the postmodernist era undermines, twists, and experiments outside of the conventions of logic, reason, or objectivity, seemingly for the sake of doing so. Traditional institutions are mocked, and religion is rejected, as chaos and upheaval continue ravaging the world. Maybe not to such a degree as they did during the 20th century, but to a certain degree, that's for sure. The notion of a properly written work of literature has been fully and utterly discarded, for any work could potentially be considered a masterpiece from someone's perspective, while at the same time considered a total farce and literature regurgitation by others. There is literally no consensus on anything, for perception of what is good or bad is totally subjective. But, at the same time, just as valid as truth itself, if such a conceptualization even exists. This abstractionism of literature continues to permeate and doesn't cease to intensify, which is made possible by the internet, for notions from all over the world are being dumped into the internet, mixing and intermixing, combining and recombining, literally non-stop. Therefore, English literature in our day and age doesn't really seem to be influenced by any movement per se, except for the one that deems everything to be worthy of praise and at the same time critique. In this way, diminishing the value of truly masterful works of literature and praising works of literature that would be recognized as pure nonsense and lazy writing just 100 years ago. This concludes the first video of the English Literary Eras series. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.